Welcome, Lauren. It's good to see you.
Hi, Jeff. It's nice to see you too. Thank you.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I actually had a better week this week. I think that I feel like we've been meeting a couple of times and I think the progress is slow, but I feel like I'm seeing something and I really enjoyed the homework this past week. So I think yeah, I'm feeling good today.
That's terrific news. We'll get to that in a minute, but it's good to hear that because I every now and then I'll give the homework and think, oh gosh, I hope this doesn't, isn't something you dread. So it
Yeah.
sounds good. Is there anything from the past week in particular that you'd like me to know about?
Yeah, okay, so I know that we've talked a lot about how I've been struggling in work and I've been really stressed and I haven't wanted to like push back on my boss or my coworkers or anything. And I think one of the reasons that I'm feeling better this week and that I wanted to share with you was that this week I actually did hold a little bit firmer with my boss. And I think it went really well where, that big project we've been working on came in conflict with a work event that we were having. And essentially my boss was going to make me miss the work event and like continue to work throughout the night. And I really held my own and was like, no, like it's really important that I'm able to go to this, to network and meet people. And like this can wait until tomorrow. Like it won't be late. And I could definitely tell that I still struggled to have that conversation. But I was really proud of myself for like holding firm.
I think that is wonderful to hear. That's a big step, and that took
Mm.
some bravery. And I don't think it's something you could have done 3 weeks ago or a month ago,
Yeah,
something like that.
absolutely.
So that's terrific. How did you feel while that was happening, or after in the aftermath of it?
No, yeah. This is also, I think, kind of why I wanted to talk about it with you. Like, there was an element of myself where I was so proud and I was like, wow, like that's a big deal for me. Like I think that's a big step. And I could also tell that like I did have an aftershock. Like I definitely avoided my boss at the event. Like I did feel a little bit of that like pins and needles, like, you know, tense stomach feeling. And I think that I can tell that I still feel really shaky about it. So mixed emotions, I think is what I'd say.
Why do you think you felt shaky about it? Was it worrying about what your boss was going to think or say to you,
Mhm.
or something else?
Yeah, I think partially just shaky and like I didn't feel totally confident. Like I definitely it felt a little forced, and a little bit like I had to push it out of me. And yeah, I was concerned about the ramifications, just like getting blowback or like, like some possible kind of like retaliation or just like negative impact, either like that night or later on. Like I think maybe like slightly paranoid about it.
Okay. Well, regardless, that is a huge step, and you should feel good about yourself for taking it. I guess I'd like to, I'd like to ask, what would you like to focus on this week? Last week we focused a little bit on the feelings of inadequacy you had at work that were
Mm,
triggered by some experiences there. I'm
mhm,
fine with exploring that again. If you feel like it's a priority, if there's something else that's on your mind, we can shift
mhm.
into that. I want you to help set the agenda here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the inadequacy piece still feels big for me, and but maybe also attaching it a little bit more to the conflict that we talked about, like being in conflict, like with my boss, like with my coworkers, because I do think that this situation this past week was not like a huge conflict, but it was definitely tense and like felt like it had those tones.
Okay. Okay, that's fair enough.
Mm,
The Some of the plans that we talked about that we made for last week may be sort of relevant here.
mm.
Um, you had said you were going to give yourself periodic reminders that you were doing a good job. I think you said something about sticky notes on your desk. How did that go?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty cool. I have a monitor at my work desk, and I found out you can like buy these plastic like attachments, and I put three sticky notes, just affirming myself that like I was competent, I could like do good work, that I like, I like bring something to the table. And I found that by making sure that I just looked at those at least once a day and like reviewed them for myself, that it really did ground me more. Especially at work. I think usually I do that after the workday, and so it was nice to do it in the moment.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Did you have to remind yourself to do it, or did it just sort of come naturally to do it?
No, so it did not come naturally. I do think I got onto myself a little bit, like, I really wanted it to become natural, which is part of the reason why I tried to put it front and center, but I ended up setting alarms on my phone just to, like, make sure that I did
Very
it.
smart. It's almost like you need to make sticky notes to remind you to look at the other sticky
Yeah.
notes.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Using your phone and technology in some way, really
Mm,
smart. There was another part of it, which is we sort of talked about it in passing, and that was you had talked about the idea of making efforts to talk with people you know and trust about your
mhm,
difficulties, that this was something that was hard to do.
mhm.
Is that something that you made any progress on in the past week?
So I tried to a little bit. I do think it was a step for me that my closest friend from college actually is in like a really similar kind of like job situation. She's a lawyer. So like very high stress and pressure. And I know like she's very open with me, which I think is why I like feel so drawn to her, that she struggles with a lot of the same feelings in her own workplace. And we've always had this dynamic that like I'm the more like solid one, just kind of like tough. I can get through it. I don't complain. And that she's more of like the expressive one. And so I definitely didn't feel like I could get into all of it this week with her. But I did just kind of start to like let her know that I was like struggling with my boss, that like work was a bit much. And she was really supportive, and I think she was shocked, because I just never talk like that. But yeah, no, I think she like really wanted to be there for me and like wanted to talk more ultimately.
And how did it feel when you were talking to her? Was it satisfying? Was it scary?
Mhm.
What were your main emotions there?
I do think it was scary. I think like a part of the reason we're friends is because she like inspires me so much, but I think I also realized that in trying to be open with her, I like felt myself like almost comparing myself to her. I think that I thought that by opening up, I was like showing that I was vulnerable. And that like even though I know that like we're completely equal, like intellectually, I'm like not one of us is better than the other, like needs to be better than the other. I still felt like I was making myself small in comparison to her. And I think that was strange to feel.
Well, and it sounds like she handled it very well also, that you
Mm,
maybe there's a reason why the two of you are friends, because you trusted her enough to sort of see you in a vulnerable position. So she returned the favor basically of you making yourself vulnerable. So that
yeah.
I think that's a win-win. The other thing that you and I talked about was the big part of the homework, which was we were going to have you write a letter to
Mm.
yourself, a point of view, perhaps of this friend that you're speaking about. How did that go? Was that did you would you be comfortable sharing it with me if in fact you did write the letter?
So I didn't necessarily write it as a full letter. I did just kind of like write some more bullet points. I mean, I really found, and this felt like very meta, that like I was really struggling to craft it into a letter because I kept getting like obsessed with it not sounding right or sounding false and like wanting to edit it. And I was like doing it on Word and I had to switch to paper. And so I got some things down. But yeah, it felt kind of weird. But essentially, I think to like bring it together, what I really, really emphasized in the notes to myself was just like how okay it is and like how important it is to hold space for people who are struggling with work or struggling with stress, and that they like people really deserve to like have a balanced workload and be able to advocate for themselves. and that it's okay to go to supports in that process, and that a lot of times it can actually be essential, if like someone like a boss doesn't realize what's going on, or maybe like in the way that my friend responded to me when I talked to her, that if people can't tell, that sometimes you have to let them in. And so practicing that vulnerability, feeling confident, and like the advocacy piece, I think came out as the main themes.
What do you think made you willing to be vulnerable?
Like with my friend or in the letter.
Well, in the letter or with your
Yeah.
either.
I think honestly in both cases, like I did have a sense of just like feeling like it was a safe space. Like the letter, I knew like no one else was going to see except for you potentially. Especially no one who was going to be like evaluating me or something. And it was harder with my friend, but I definitely still felt that like we have so much trust between us. And I think also that, she doesn't, our friendship isn't contingent on like how well I perform. And I think that insecurity, I notice like it does come up with my boss, it comes up with my parents, like comes up with a lot of like my mentor figures. But with her and in the letter, it was like I don't have to like, bring in some new fancy client in order to like maintain those things.
Let's you mentioned your boss, and I'd like to go back and talk about this interaction that you had with your boss.
Mm.
And I want to try something a little bit different today. It's called cognitive restructuring. And what that is so far we've spent our time sort of learning about noticing thoughts, the automatic
Mm.
thoughts that we talked about, and our
Mm.
behaviors, and then challenging those thoughts and behaviors. What cognitive restructuring does is it basically tries to change your thoughts and behaviors. It's kind of
Okay.
the next step. And I should make it clear what we're looking for here are not completely positive thoughts, because that's not the way
Uh,
it works. It's not realistic. Just saying everything is great is not a helpful thing for anybody. The world is
mm,
all rainbows and unicorns. What we're looking for
mm,
here are balanced thoughts, and that's when you're fair
mm,
and honest with yourself about situations. So let's talk again about this situation with your boss, who
mm,
essentially, if I have this right, wanted you to work instead of going to a group function, which you felt was unfair and taking advantage of you. Do I have that right?
absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Um, so the way this works is we think of a situation and then we think of the negative thought that comes with it. So let's say the situation is this feeling that you had after when you're at the work gathering and the boss, you're worried about the boss, maybe judging you or
Mm,
some you're going to you're feeling like you're going to get some negative feedback from the boss about
hmm.
decision. Um,
Yeah.
what was the negative thought that went along with that for you?
Hmm. I think I do think like the kind of common negative thought that I'm feeling is just like I'm not good enough. That like she would judge me because I can't do a good enough job, or like there's like something wrong with me.
Okay. Okay. So with cognitive restructuring, the best way to think about it, a helpful way for me anyway, is saying it may be true that such and such is the case,
Hmm.
and it is also true that such and such is the case. So
Hmm.
it may be true. Let's be 100% honest. It may be true that your boss was judging you in some way, shape, or form.
Hmm.
And it is also true that, and then you fill in the rest. What could also be true about the
Hmm.
situation?
I think it is also true that I think that I do good work and I have a strong work history.
Okay. And then what would the boss's response to that be? You know what I mean? Like, how would the
Mm,
boss see you differently as opposed to judging you in this situation, if that were true?
like based on that statement,
Right,
or
based on your statement.
I think that she would agree. I think that she would see me as someone who's like, worthwhile and like a genuine contributor to the team.
Okay. So in using cognitive restructuring, like the new thought, which we're coming up with together, is
Mm,
it may be true that the boss had some judgment of you, and
mm,
it's also true that the boss knows that you're doing good work
mm,
and maybe even was proud of you for standing up for yourself. Uh,
mm,
although I introduced that, I don't know if that's the way that you feel. Is
mm.
there a part of you that wonders if the boss felt that way? I don't want to put words in your mouth, obviously.
No, I appreciate. It's interesting. I've never thought about it that way, but I feel like you're making a really good and important point that even as I compare myself to my coworkers, which I think do in a lot of ways, I definitely like notice that I want to be more like, I think that's why I said so much about advocacy, that I want to be someone who can advocate for myself. And that's also a good way of doing work and preventing burnout. So I'm actually really glad that you said that as like a positive flip side.
Terrific. Did after this situation happened and you were feeling these, doubts about whether the boss was judging you or whatever, how did you feel in the aftermath? Did you feel positive about yourself, negative, a combination?
Hmm.
What was the mood after that?
I do think it was a combination. I think like even though I like so want to believe that it's important to like stand up for myself and advocate and hold my own, yeah, I do think the emotions remain mixed, and that like in talking with you right now, I can lean more into like feeling more secure around how I handled it. Um, but that is like a push and pull.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like you're being honest with yourself, and that's kind of what we're after here is the balanced thoughts, not, yay me,
Yeah.
I'm awesome. I mean, you're awesome in different ways, but um, you know, it's not an all or nothing thing.
Mm,
So the sort of final step, I guess, of the cognitive restructuring is what I like to call taking your new thoughts out for a test drive. And it sounds kind of cheesy,
mm,
but I sometimes talk to clients about how thoughts that we have and that make sense logically in our heads, we might not really feel them in our hearts. So we have to go and test them out and
mm,
try them out in different situations and remind ourselves about these thoughts and make sure that we're accurate in what we're thinking. So
mm,
I think my homework for you for this next week is to take some of these new thoughts out for a test drive, which are the thoughts of I am competent in my job. My boss does have respect for me. I
mm,
feel good that I stood up for myself. Think
mm,
about these things in work situations, assess them, if decide whether they really are spot on, whether they hold true,
mm,
whether they don't feel true to you. And you can do that in many work situations.
mm,
But and this isn't quite as concrete homework as writing yourself a letter, but it
mm.
involves some deep thinking about restructuring your thoughts a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I'm making a note so I remember it. But yeah, no, I think especially since last week was so concrete, I feel more ready to do this now.
Okay. Okay. Do you have any questions for me? Any feedback, comments about the way the sessions are going?
No, I do think I feel really good this week, just in general and like what we've been doing. So no, I just really appreciate it.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you for meeting with me, Lauren, and I will see you next week.
Okay, that sounds great.